I don't think people ever realize how heavy words can be until they've carried them for years. My parents never raised their hands to me, but the things they said cut far deeper than anything physical ever could. Useless. Hopeless. Those were my nicknames. Not son, not child, not even my real name half the time. Just useless. I still remember sitting at the dinner table as a kid, watching my siblings laugh and share stories about school while my parents lit up with pride. My brother once brought home a decent math grade, and Dad treated it like breaking news, praising him in front of everyone. That same day, I mentioned that I had fixed a broken hinge on the barn door, and Mom barely looked up from her plate. Dad smirked and muttered, "Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day," and the whole table erupted in laughter. Everyone except me. After a while, the laughs didn't sting as much as they used to. They just confirmed what I already believed about myself, that maybe I really was useless. And yet, somewhere deep down, there was this stubborn, quiet part of me that whispered, "No, you're not worthless. You just haven't been seen yet." At night, I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying those words over and over again, as if accepting them might make them hurt less. They never did. I can still hear the wind slipping through the cracks of the farmhouse windows, still smell the soil clinging to my hands after long days outside, and still hear their voices echoing in my head like ghosts that refuse to leave. But when you grow up being told you'll never amount to anything, you end up with two choices: accept it and let it bury you, or let it carve something sharp inside you, something that says, "One day, I'll prove you wrong." And though I couldn't see it then, that quiet voice inside me, the one that refused to die, would eventually change everything. Life on the farm was never easy, but I grew up knowing no different. The days started before sunrise, when the air was still damp and cold enough to bite your skin. I'd pull on my boots, already caked with layers of dried mud, and step out into the fields. The smell of hay and manure always hit first, then the sound of restless animals waiting to be fed. I carried buckets of water until my arms burned, stacked hay bales until my back ached, and patched fences with splinters digging into my palms. And yet, no matter how much I did, my efforts always seemed invisible. My father would stand there, leaning against a post with his arms crossed, his eyes scanning me with that look that said I wasn't doing it right. If my brother showed up, even for a moment, Dad's entire demeanor would shift. Suddenly, he'd be patient, encouraging, almost proud. For me, though, it was always silence, or worse, that low mutter of disappointment. I can still hear him saying, "If you just try harder, maybe you'd be worth something around here." The irony was that I tried harder than anyone, but trying never seemed enough. Sometimes I catch flashes of those mornings, even now. The sound of chickens clucking impatiently, the scrape of metal buckets against the barn floor, the smell of diesel from the tractor. Back then, I thought if I just kept working, if I proved myself through sweat and grit, one day they would finally see me. But the truth was, no matter how much effort I put in, my work was always dismissed, brushed aside. Like it didn't matter. I wasn't their golden child. I was the background character in my own family. And yet, somewhere in all of that, the farm taught me more than my parents ever did. It taught me endurance. It showed me that even when people don't notice, the work still matters. Every nail hammered, every seed planted, every fence mended was a piece of me refusing to give up. And while they called me hopeless, I was quietly building a strength they didn't even realize I had. If there's one thing that still stings, it's how easy it was for my parents to lift my siblings onto pedestals while leaving me in the shadows. My brother and sister could do the smallest thing, get a passing grade, win a little trophy at school, and suddenly the house was filled with celebration. Balloons, cake, laughter that seemed to echo through every corner of the farmhouse. But when it came to me, there was never much to celebrate. I remember one birthday in particular, when I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be different. I was turning 16, and I had worked up the courage to hope for something meaningful. My parents handed me a wrapped box with this smug little smile on their faces. I tore into it, only to find a book titled How to Become a Millionaire. At first, I laughed along, pretending it was a joke, but the truth settled in quickly. It wasn't a joke. It was their way of mocking me, of reminding me that in their eyes, I was a failure who needed a manual just to stand a chance in life. The laughter around the table that day didn't feel like family. It felt like a reminder that I'd never measure up, and it wasn't just the gifts. It was the way conversations were angled, the way their questions were always directed to my siblings. How was practice? How did the test go? What are your plans for college? And when they finally turned to me, it was always something dismissive. Did you feed the cows? Like I wasn't a person with dreams or thoughts, just free labor with a pulse. I learned to stay quiet, to let them talk around me, because speaking up only led to rolled eyes or sarcastic chuckles. I hated the comparison, the constant measuring stick I could never reach, but at the same time, I craved it. I wanted even a fraction of the pride they poured into my siblings. Looking back now, I realized that craving shaped so much of who I became. It was fuel. Every eye roll, every sarcastic gift, every time I was left out, I stored it away. And though I didn't know it then, I was building an anger that one day would turn into something stronger than their approval could ever give me. If there's a moment I'll never forget, the night when all the little cuts, all the insults, all the years of being overlooked finally carved something hard inside me. It was late, one of those tense family dinners where I could already feel the storm brewing in the silence. My father had been drinking, which always made his tongue sharper. At some point, the conversation turned to the farm, to the future, and without hesitation, he said, "This place will never be yours." Just like that. No pause, no softening of the words. He looked me dead in the eye as if he wanted me to feel the sting, and he made sure everyone at the table heard it. My mother nodded, as if it were a fact carved into stone, and my siblings smirked, comfortable in the knowledge that the farm would belong to them someday. I remember sitting there, staring at my plate, the room spinning while my ears burned. I wanted to argue, to shout, to slam my fists down and demand they see me. But instead, I stayed silent, my hand clenched into a fist under the table. Nails digging so deep into my palm I could feel the skin break. The humiliation of that moment burned hotter than any insult I'd ever received. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me. It was that they had erased me completely. Like I was invisible. Like no matter how much I gave to that land, no matter how many mornings I broke my back before the sun even rose, I would always be the useless one, not worthy of carrying on the legacy. That night, something shifted. I walked away from the table feeling smaller than ever, but buried under that shame was a spark. A sharp, dangerous spark that whispered, "Fine. If you don't see me as part of this family, then maybe one day, I'll take the one thing you think defines you." I didn't know how or when, but I knew something had cracked. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. For a long time after that dinner, I carried their words like a weight I couldn't shake. "This farm will never be yours." It echoed in my head while I worked, while I lay awake at night, while I forced myself to keep going. But sometimes life has a strange way of revealing things when you least expect it. A few months later, I was in town running errands when I stopped by the small law office that had handled my grandfather's estate. I don't even know what made me walk in that day. Call it curiosity, call it desperation, but something pulled me there. I asked to look at some of the old papers regarding the farm, and after a bit of hesitation, the clerk handed me a stack of yellowed files that smelled like dust and age. I remember sitting in that dim office, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above me, flipping through page after page until I saw it. My name. Not my father's. Not my mother's. Mine. It turned out that when my grandfather passed, the farm wasn't left to them at all. It had been left to me, through some quiet decision he'd made long before. Maybe he saw the way I was treated. Maybe he believed in me in a way my parents never could. Whatever the reason, the truth was right there, in black and white. Legally, the farm had always been mine. I sat there in shock, my hands trembling as I traced the words on the paper. For a moment, I thought there had to be a mistake. How could this land, the land they lorded over me, the land they used to remind me of my place, already belong to me? I remembered my father's words, so sure, so final. "This place will never be yours." And I almost laughed, because it already was. They just didn't know it. That realization hit me like a wave of fire and ice all at once. Part of me felt vindicated, powerful even, but another part of me was terrified. What was I supposed to do with this? I tucked the papers back into the envelope, thanked the clerk, and walked out of that office with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Outside, the town looked exactly the same. Cars passing by, shop doors opening and closing, but for me, everything had changed. For the first time in my life, the word hopeless didn't fit anymore. I had a secret, a truth, and with it, I had the upper hand. After I discovered the truth, everything about the way I looked at my parents shifted. On the outside, I stayed the same, the useless one, the one who could never do anything right. I let them keep calling me names, let them keep treating me like the shadow in the room. But inside, I carried a secret that burned like a hidden flame. For the first time in my life, I wasn't powerless. I would wake up before dawn, pull on my boots, and head out to the fields just like always. But while I hauled hay or fixed fences, I wasn't working for them anymore. I was working for myself, even if they didn't know it. Every insult they threw at me, I learned to swallow with a smile, because deep down I knew the truth. They were standing on my land, breathing on my inheritance, bragging about something that had never been theirs. Sometimes I'd sneak into the barn at night, the air thick with the smell of hay and dust, and make quiet phone calls to lawyers and realtors, laying out plans piece by piece. My heart would race with every whispered conversation, afraid they'd overhear, but also exhilarated by the thought of what was coming. It was strange, almost surreal, living that double life. At the dinner table, my father would lecture me about how I'd never amount to anything, and I'd nod like I agreed, biting back the urge to laugh. My mother would sigh about how I'd never understand responsibility, and I'd excuse myself, knowing full well I was taking more responsibility than they could even imagine. My siblings would boast about how they'd one day run the farm, and I'd just sit back, letting them dream, while inside I knew I was the one holding the strings. Pretending to be powerless gave me more control than I'd ever had before, and with every passing day, I grew stronger. They thought they were humiliating me, breaking me down, but in reality, they were feeding the fire. And all the while, I was preparing for the day when the roles would flip, when they would see just how wrong they had been. The day I signed the papers felt unreal, like stepping into a dream I wasn't sure I was allowed to have. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, the smell of polished wood and coffee lingering in the air, my palms damp against the pen as I hovered over the contract. My lawyer slid the documents toward me, each page heavy with meaning, each signature line a quiet revolution. I thought about all those years, being laughed at, being told I'd never own this place, and now here I was, holding the power to end it all. With one stroke of ink, I could close the book on their arrogance and write a new one for myself. The pen scratched across the paper, steady but almost trembling at the same time, and when it was done, I set it down and just stared at the page. The farm, the land they worshipped as their legacy, was no longer theirs to dream about. It was sold, gone. Walking out of that office, I felt a mixture of triumph and disbelief. The afternoon sun was hot on my face, the air thick with the sound of traffic, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I clutched the envelope of documents against my chest as if someone might snatch them away. For so long, I had been the one overlooked, the one dismissed, and now I was the one who had pulled the rug out from under them without a word. It felt powerful, almost intoxicating, but also surreal, like I had stepped outside of my own life. I remember looking down at my calloused hands, the same ones that had been blistered and bruised on that farm, and thinking, these hands just changed everything. The sale wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about the land. It was about reclaiming something they had tried to strip away from me for years, my worth. And as I walked away from that building, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Telling them was almost more satisfying than the sale itself. I didn't go in yelling or gloating. I didn't need to. I waited until we were all in the kitchen. One evening, the air heavy with the smell of fried onions and the sound of the TV droning in the other room. My father was in his usual spot at the table, my mother fussing with dishes, my siblings bickering about something small and stupid. I set the envelope down in the middle of the table, slid it across the wood, and said quietly, "The farm's sold." At first, no one moved. My father just blinked at me, confusion twisting across his face before it hardened into rage. My mother froze with a plate still in her hand, her knuckles white around the edge of it. My siblings started laughing, until they realized I wasn't joking. I told them everything. The inheritance, the papers, the sale. Every word seemed to hit like a hammer, shattering the illusion they had lived in for years. The eruption was immediate. My father's voice thundered through the house, spitting words so sharp they almost cut the air. He shouted that I was a traitor, that I'd ruined the family, that I'd stolen what was rightfully theirs. My mother started crying, her wails more out of shock than sadness, and my siblings screamed over each other, demanding answers, accusing me of betrayal. And there I was, standing in the middle of the storm, calm in a way I had never felt before. I didn't shout back, I didn't cry, I didn't try to explain beyond the truth I had already laid out. I just watched them unravel. All those years, they had laughed at me, belittled me, told me I was nothing, and now they were the ones falling apart. It was strange, almost peaceful. I realized in that moment that I didn't need their approval, I didn't need their love, and I certainly didn't need their permission. For the first time in my life, I held all the power, and their voices, so loud, so cruel, no longer had the ability to crush me. That I in the days after the explosion, the house felt different, emptier, though not in a sad way. My parents barely looked at me, my siblings avoided me, and the silence that once made me feel invisible now felt like freedom. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their words like stones in my chest. I packed my things slowly, deliberately, each folded shirt and worn pair of jeans feeling like a step closer to starting over. When I finally left, I didn't slam the door or make some dramatic exit. I just walked out with a small bag slung over my shoulder, the farm shrinking behind me as I headed towards something new. I still remember my first morning away. The sun came through clean windows instead of the cracked, dust-streaked ones of the farmhouse. The air smelled of coffee and fresh paint instead of manure and diesel. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was light, almost comforting. I sat there with my hands wrapped around a warm mug, staring out at a skyline that didn't have barns or tractors, and for the first time, I felt at peace. No insults, no comparisons, no voices tearing me down. Just me, in my own space. Free.it wasn't easy, of course. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd destroyed something I couldn't get back. But then I'd remember the way they looked at me all those years, the sneers, the smirks, the words that cut me down, and I'd realize I hadn't destroyed anything worth keeping. What I'd done was reclaim myself. And every time I thought about the farm, it wasn't with regret, it was with relief. The weight of that place, the weight of their voices, was no longer mine to carry. That I'm not sure if closure is ever really something that arrives with trumpets and fanfare. For me, it came quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday. I was unpacking a new set of plates in my tiny apartment when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. Just one line. "We didn't know you hated us." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to respond. I didn't owe them an explanation, or a justification, or even a defense. I had spent years twisting myself into knots trying to earn love that was never given freely. Now, I didn't want it. I wanted peace. And I had it. People always say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that's only true when the blood runs warm. My family may share my DNA, but they never shared my dreams, my pain, or my victories. And that's okay. I built something for myself out of the ruins they left me in. I walked away from the farm, from the labels they gave me. And I didn't crumble. I grew. I still think about that place sometimes. The smell of cut grass after rain. The creak of the barn door on windy nights. But it's like remembering a chapter from a book I've already finished. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just was. And now, I'm writing a new chapter, one where I'm not the useless one or the hopeless one. I'm just me. And that's enough.